following is a presentation of Learfield IMG College. From the Georgia Southern Sports Network, powered by Learfield IMG College.
Wings up, Eagle Nation! Touchdown, Georgia Southern!
This is Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look into Eagle athletics.
Taking a look through all the other action in Georgia Southern athletics this past week. A lot of road action. A lot of teams hitting the old I-16 out of town.
Getting on the steel horse and taking us to parts north, south, west, wherever. Can't really go too much farther east.
Now let's return to the Learfield IMG College studios. Here are your hosts, Colin Lacy and Danny Reed.
That's a fact, Jack.
Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, your all-access look inside Georgia Southern athletics. Colin Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, and a very special guest on a special edition of Inside Eagle Nation. Got the director of Georgia Southern athletics, Jared Benko, to wrap up the 22-23 athletic calendar year. We put kind of a spin on it last week, but the official ending of the 21-22 athletic calendar year. Jared, appreciate you joining us.
Oh, sure thing. I was watching Danny play the percussions on the way in. I didn't know you have a good beat to it.
I've heard it about 180 sometimes now.
I was about to say.
No, it's hard to believe. You know, we put out the briefing today. It's I think it finally hit me after obviously we exited the baseball regional, and then I think it was until the next day, that Monday, I'm like, wow, it's like you're on a fast-moving train in a good sense, and the train stops, and you're like, all right, what's next? You know, and then your mind's already going towards the fall. So it's been a heck of a year, been a heck of a spring. So.
Start there with the baseball regional hosting here at J.I. Clement Stadium, and you've talked about it a lot. You mentioned it earlier today in the Benko briefing that came out, but being able to host an event like that here in Statesboro, and not only host it, but we talked about it, there's a very thin line between being able to host it and have it be a success. And I think having it a success was definitely on the docket this year.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to having, great people around you. I shared this with a colleague. I was in Atlanta earlier this week and was talking to a colleague that hosted as well. And I said, to me, the piece is so impressive is we might have 40%, maybe half the staff of some of the other institutions. They call them the Power Five or Autonomy Five. And to me, the piece that was so impressive is, when you put in a bid, there's a lot that goes into it. But really, where the separator, as you mentioned, was really the ability to execute on it. And I thought that was just something that I was so proud of. And it's people coming together. It's not, hey, there was no job too small for anybody. And I just think it's a testament to one, the people we have here at the university, but also to just the culture. And just really proud of everyone's effort. I mean, to me, listen, we wanted to go out and get it out of the regional and obviously play up in Knoxville as it turned out. But having said that, I mean, I think we got some great feedback and from NCAA and others, and really positioned ourselves well for the future.
Did you have a opportunity a couple of weeks ago when Georgia Southern hosted the regional kind of sit back and realize what was happening? Because we talked about it last week, how we sat back and looked, and Notre Dame and Texas Tech opened up the regional at J.I. Clement Stadium, and just sitting back, hearing the Notre Dame fight song over the PA, you're like, man, this kind of brings it full circle of what's actually happening this week.
It hit me Saturday night against Notre Dame. Just having been at some other institutions before we've hosted, it doesn't get lost on you, the gravity, or the magnitude of that event. But for us, for me, it was going toe-to-toe with Notre Dame, and that crowd was so electric. Noah's home run, I was actually on the hill and down the first base line in right field, and I jumped and caught my footing because I could have rolled down the hill. But it was something about that night, and that's where, again, quite frankly, that's what we aspire for all our venues. You want that same feeling in Paulson and obviously at Hanner and others, and I'm just so thankful for our fans and donors and supporters that came out, because that place was super electric. I actually had a friend visiting in town from Starkville, and he you mentioned y'all met him too, And he's like, man, this is what college baseball is about. And so just really proud of J.I. and proud of our fans.
All right, to go through all the improvements, to roll in portable bleachers down the first base line, you also mentioned in the briefing today that that's going to be part of possible more improvements at J.I. Clements over the next few months. 2 parts here. 1, are those bleachers here to stay? And 2, how do you envision J.I. Clements getting better?
Yeah, I talked to we actually Coach Ed and I visited earlier this afternoon with Chris Davis. We were talking about a couple things, and when you get excited about stuff, I start talking real fast, and Chris does too. I think his head was spinning at all the stuff we have thinking about. But I'll share with you a couple things. One, I like to think whether those same bleachers stay there or we get some more, we buy some more. The plan is to keep those there. We do out of safety and abundance. We need to extend the netting down the first baseline, just from a standpoint of some rockets that can be hit there. We didn't have any, at least that I was aware of during the regionals. But so yes, there we also are working with Yellowwood on some outfield decking right now to the left of the Blue Monster. We're also there might be some that have the affinity for the green paint in the stadium, but we're trying to want to get that all blue, Georgia Southern blue. And then the really big piece, for us is going to be the renovation of the Wiggins building or the demo and ultimately starting over there. And we're going to have a structural engineer come in and make sure it's done right. But that facility, what you'll find is it'll be first and foremost is going to address our needs. And so when you start looking at, obviously the way it's currently set up, a bigger locker room with the 50 lockers, team meeting space, obviously team, player space, or student athlete space, coaches' offices in the hitting lab, pitching lab, fueling station, athletic, obviously a satellite athletic training center. So, so we start with kind of our wish list, and then you have to see how it lays out, then ultimately the costs that come in. But no, we're going to hit it pretty hard, and so we've already had the kind of a kickoff meeting scheduled here pretty soon, and part of it, honestly, too, is coming off my last institution when we did a $68 million stadium renovation or a totally complete build at Mississippi State. Baseball is probably the one sport I've worked on a lot, just relative to facilities. And so I'm excited to sit down with Coach Hennon and excited to sit down with our team and really lay it out.
Had a couple of questions come in earlier on this afternoon on Facebook. You kind of answered Wes's question on the upgrades to J.I. Clements Stadium, but Moose asking a question, and we hear it a lot of the football team and their success having an impact on all 17 sports around Georgia Southern athletics. How does an event like this, where Georgia Southern baseball had not only a great year on the field, but an opportunity to host a regional, how does that affect all of Georgia Southern athletics?
Well, it's huge. I mean, we always talk about a rising tide lifts all boats. We actually had a softball PSA on campus today, prospective student athlete, and we're talking to her because she has a chance to be a game changer in a lot of ways. And I said, hey, did you see our baseball regional? Well, sure. I said, we were one of 16 national seeds. I was like, we can do the same thing for softball. And part of that is not that shift in the paradigm, but we've talked about it. We want to be competitive at everything. And so what it further illustrates is you can come to Georgia Southern, get a great degree, have success on the field or on the court and diamond, whatever, and also socially grow and mature. And so we have everything we need here to be successful. So to answer your question, going back, is when we start raising money, and it's going to be here the next several weeks, raising money for JI, in particular for this new facility for baseball, that's a chance for Eagle Nation to continue to step up and help support. Now, the one thing I talked specifically the last question, Danny, about what it looks like. We're also going to tie in a lot of some premium seating and some fan amenities too, because baseball's such a social sport. If you think about it. It brings families together. It's a great sport, and we're going to have some opportunities, I think, to create some cool spaces within this new expansion as well.
Baseball was the first sport last year to go back to 100% capacity. It was just over a year ago today that happened.
Yep.
This being the first full year off of a worldwide pandemic, what do you feel you got accomplished?
Well, yeah, I actually shared this the other day. I'm always pleased. You're never really happy, but you're always pleased. I think for us, listen, this fall with football was tough. I mean, it was not a great season. Proud of our guys for persevering and Coach Whitley for getting through that. But you look at the other fall when you had volleyball and soccer go up 100 plus RPI spots. Soccer and a first year coach, get to the championship game for soccer. Basketball, Coach Berger and I talk, and I'm excited about some of the newcomers he has this year. This is his first really true recruiting calendar. Yeah. Coach Howard obviously had 18 wins last year, and she continues to have success. And really the spring's where he hit our stride, because you look at, Mimi Burke, first year winning Sun Belt, Carter Collins, obviously success getting to the top 25, obviously out of Arizona. And then you look at baseball, we did hosting a regional and obviously being a national seed. So we're starting to hit our stride, and then what you'll see this fall with Coach Elton is really that momentum is going to swing into the fall. And so it's always been about getting the right people on the bus and the right spots. And we've got those folks there now. And, we just actually had a track candidate on campus, and we have an opportunity to really get our track program going. So at the end of the day, it's all people-based. Everything we do is people-based and getting the right folks. And if you get the right folks on board, they usually recruit the right student-athletes too.
We talked about it last week, and you've mentioned it many times, 3 different teams in the spring got to NCAA postseason with men's and women's golf and baseball, obviously. When you kind of take a step back and look at it from the 100,000-foot view, how big is that for a spring sport 3 different times, or 3 different spring sports, rather, to get to NCAA postseason the first time it's ever happened here at Georgia Southern?
Yeah, I think it's big, but what we talked about before, we're a process-driven organization. We don't always focus on the outcomes. It's more about what goes into the process. And so, honestly, I don't do a great job sometimes pausing and probably appreciating, because you're always every day coming in trying to get better. And I always say it sounds Pollyanna, but that's really our mentality, is every day coming in, how do we get better? And listen, some days you don't get better. Some days, I say some days you're the pigeon, some days you're the statue, right? And some days you are the statue, and you don't have days that are great, but you have to bounce back from that. So I think it was huge. I also would tell you, because things were going so fast this spring, we probably didn't have a full appreciation for it. I think this summer, as you kind of reflect and you look at ways doing a self-eval and assessment, it probably will have a greater magnitude of that. But it was huge, and I think it kind of goes back to where I see us and where we see us going as a department. I'm telling you, the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to be special. And what you're starting to see is some of those dividends coming out of the pandemic especially.
And we looked at the on-field success, but off the field, we're less than 2 months ago breaking ground on an indoor practice facility for County Boston Stadium, something that wasn't even conceived maybe a year or 2 ago, and then also the groundbreaking for the Jack and Ruth Ann Hill Convocation Center, with everything else that is occurring in Statesboro and Bullock County.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If I go around the Eagle Clubs, which I did, and I said, hey, when did you think we'd have ever $80 million in facilities? People look at me like I had 3 eyes. But I also would share with you, too. You're seeing the new fence going up around Pulse, and we're getting ready to spend, over $500,000 and north of that to do new locker room and new dugouts for softball. We're doing some things down the Hearing Pavilion. I can go on and on. We're trying to touch as many facilities as possible. And that honestly was one of our biggest needs coming in here, was we were behind facilities, behind on infrastructure. And people can say what they want to, but 16 to 18-year-olds, when you recruit them, they're very visual, and they want to see progress and want to see results. And so, it's interesting, the indoor facility, we brought it to the foundation board in December of 20. And you look, broke ground on it April of 22. So you're looking at about a 16-month, delta or turnaround. So when people say, well, baseball might take a while, we'll just, we want you to get involved, but stand back and watch. We're getting ready to do it again with baseball. And part of that is that vision of, comprehensive excellence. And you know what? We can't do it without Eagle Nation. And we're so thankful and blessed to have people step forward, both on the Convocation Center, but also the indoor. And really with baseball, I think people saw this weekend, we're not very far off from being in Omaha again. And I think that's where some of these projects we're talking about, it adds to the game day environment, but also it's going to help, really recruit elite student athletes and even better where we are.
You talk about you got to go to a lot of the Eagle Club tours this year. What's the kind of feel around Eagle Nation? I know there's a lot of success and a lot of hype around the football season. A lot of success in the spring has got everybody excited, but what's the biggest kind of factor that you saw going throughout and touching a lot of Eagle Nation this year?
Well, it was excitement. I was joking, and Danny was emceeing, obviously, majority of those, as I felt like the warm-up act for Coach Helton a lot of times. And, he's like he's more like the Beatles, and I'm like the cover band from around the corner. But now there's general excitement. I think, going through this past fall and knowing the headaches and some of the challenges we have, and what you're seeing is further affirmation, whether it be in recruiting, whether it be in assembling a staff, whether it be in the spring game. you're seeing all the positive signs of the direction we're going. And so people are excited. Listen, we can say what we want to, but, football, I always say, if you think about a car, football is the engine, the carburetor, the transmission, the water pump, you name it. I mean, we go as football goes. But having said that, what you're also seeing, we have a lot of coaches out on the road, and you're seeing excitement. Coach Willis, as an example, was talking about raising money for a new Terraflex, which is a new floor for volleyball, and how that benefits, recovery and obviously prevents injuries for student athletes. And you're seeing people saying, well, you know what? We went to a couple volleyball matches this year. We loved it. And so I think coming out of the pandemic, what I saw was a further appreciation for maybe some other sports that don't traditionally get the attention. And then ultimately, everybody's always excited to see Danny Reed. So that kind of always takes the cake there.
There you go.
I didn't realize that was a thing.
Oh, yes, you did.
Not for someone who doesn't know what I look like. Well, unless they watch this, I guess. But
I'm just saying, everybody, is kind of, I mentioned the Beatle reference. When they see Danny, it's always a big deal for folks.
The Beatles are big?
Yeah.
There was a lot of things off the field that went really well for Georgia Southern this year. I know something that's been big for you and Chris Davis as well, being able to get the nutrition program really up and running, a cumulative 3.16 GPA overall, a lot of things that don't necessarily get the limelight that they probably deserve, but a huge part of what Georgia Southern athletics has been about.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, we're an institution of higher education, and the 316 to spring cumulative, we're a 308. Our goal when we had the strategic plan last summer was a 3.2, and I joke with Reggie. He's like, Jared, that's high. I'm like, well, that's what we're aspiring. Like, I'd rather aim high and miss high than just aim low every time. And so the grade piece to me is ultimately comes down to the accountability from our student athletes, the discipline to attend class. Listen, attending class is half the battle, right? And so really proud of the success. And you mentioned football, the 284 GPA with football. That was really a drastic improvement from the fall. But then also, too, you start looking at the Apex program, and whether it be we have 4 student athletes studying abroad this summer. We had Women's Eagles as a We Lead. It's Women's Eagle Leadership, where we have sophomore and junior women, a program that's created by women for women. And then we also have the career tours in Atlanta. And so then you look at nutrition, and we had 0 nutritionists a year ago. We're at 2 now, and it's going to be called GATA Fuel. And so ultimately, you think about the 4 areas that surround the student athlete: strength conditioning, athletic training, sports psychology, and strength conditioning. And we're bettering those 4 areas. And especially the last year, we've gotten remarkably better. And when you have those holistically, you surround the student athlete with those support areas, I don't care what school you're at, the performance in and out of the classroom and in and out of the field of play is going to increase.
18 days from now, our Sunbelt family is going to grow by 4.
Yeah.
Going into the year with a league that will transition from 12 to 14, but all schools would be football-playing schools, what is going to represent Georgia Southern's ability to be well-positioned amongst this new group of Sunbelt schools?
Well, listen, and it's probably not what people want to hear. I don't really worry about other people in the conference. I think it kind of comes back to taking care of your own business, internal. We've got to aspire, and again, I said that when I came here, was we do have rivals. Georgia State's a rival, and App State's a rival, and you get those. But at the end of the day, we're not benchmarking, indexing ourselves against others in the conference. And so, yes, we have new teams that are coming in, and some new trips and new destinations and new opponents, and that's great. But at the end of the day, we control what we control, and that's where we have to go back to how are we getting better. And that's where it's a growth mindset. And we talk about, y'all have heard it in staff meetings, we use that word all the time, growth mindset, 2 words. And the second is a care factor. You have to care about everything has a sense of urgency. Everything matters. And ultimately, when it's coming, relative from our leadership group on down to obviously our coaches and staff, and then we ultimately, cooperate that and show that, the results are going to continue to follow because I'm telling you that the people we have here now, we're in a rare era right now, a really special time where the results are starting to come. They're going to continue to come. But you got to focus on your own house. And, ultimately it's going to be really cool to have some new members, especially look at like in football, having 14 football institutions now going from 10. But it's also going to be more competitive. Listen, we have 8 teams, correct me if I'm wrong, 9 teams, that were bowl teams last year, right? When's the last time we played 9 teams on the schedule that made a bowl last year? But I think you also take that and overlay that. It's going to become more competitive. But, to be the preeminent, group of 5 conference in the country means you have to get better.
Yeah.
So
Got a question from Bob McKessie asking, will there be a booster weekend gathering like there was in August of 21? And to thank you for everything you've done for Georgia.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate it, Bob. It's always good to hear from you. We ain't got that for yet. I imagine we'll do something, but we need to take our collective breath from the baseball regional. That was a heavy lift in a couple of days, and we'll have a chance here probably coming up here the next couple of weeks to kind of plan that out.
One of the big things that you've said ever since you got to Statesboro was you've got to go hard, and then whenever you get to the summer, be able to take a step back and kind of reflect and also recharge. What's the recharge for the Benko family this year? Any big plans over the summer?
Yeah, I don't always do the best job of that, but no, it's we've got a couple conferences and piggybacking on the back of that. So it's I'm actually excited. In July, we're taking the boys. I've got a deal at Notre Dame. I'm on the faculty for a conference there, and I'm going to take the boys to a Cubs game, which has always kind of been a bucket list for me.
That's awesome.
Wrigley and Fenway have always kind of been bucket list ballparks, and I'm always mad at myself. I was in Boston several years ago, actually before Sarah and I got married, and had a chance to go to a Red Sox game. It was on the Green Monster, and then they told me the price of the tickets, and it was more than my rent that month. I had to pass. But if we get obviously we're getting Wrigley this summer, I'll have a chance to somewhere with Fenway to get, because those are the two ballparks growing up that I always idolize and always watch. So
now we've seen the ghillie suit come out. Any more pranks coming up?
There's always going to be pranks, but you have to also space them out. So yeah, we've got some. I can't divulge some of the ones. I've got a couple coaches we've talked a few about. I think this fall there'll be some good ones. We just we can't give too much credence in that. I'll tell you, I mean, the one I still get asked about that ghillie suit, and I got to find out where it's at, because I have one more prank that we could use with it, but I don't know where it's at right now. So.
I will guarantee you I know what coaches you've already talked to.
Yeah, well,
I'm not going to say it, but I guarantee I know which coaches you've talked to.
So, well, we try to have fun. Listen, when you work hard, you got to have a little fun. But yeah, that was actually pretty good. It's funny. Coach McCaffrey the other day, he got me, and he was actually getting me back when I scared him, and he actually is funny because he felt bad that night, and when he tackled me, and I said, listen. I think he was calling to actually felt like a workman's comp, and I said, well, listen, actually, I separated my shoulder. It's actually pretty bad. And he felt so bad. I'm like, I'm just playing with you. So you gotta have to have pranks upon pranks or jokes upon pranks. So.
Jared, really appreciate you taking some time with us. I know this is a time where you like to enjoy with the family, but really appreciate you taking some time with us tonight to kind of wrap up the season. No, sure thing. And listen, I really do think I want to reiterate about, as y'all decide to pick names for your upcoming child, that I think Danny's a great name. So when you and Rachel decide names, I think the only challenge of that is you're putting too high expectations on it. That's true. So setting the bar too high.
But you could also take an N out, make an I. It works both ways.
Now you're starting to sound like Terry, whether it's Terry with a Y or Terry with an I.
I like Danny better than Terry. So what do you think? I don't know if Terry's listening right now.
We'll find out in about 15 seconds.
I know the answer to that one, too.
Sometimes we have to just make sure he's listening in. So.
Yeah. Jared, appreciate the time.
I appreciate Hail Southern.
Thanks, man.
Once again, that's Jared Benko, Director of Athletics for Georgia Southern, and a huge asset to this community and to this athletic department, there's no doubt.
I think about where we were just maybe 26 months ago and where we are now, and in another 24 to 26 months where we're going to be. With an indoor practice facility up, with a convocation center probably pretty close to being done, how much different this town is going to look. You're going to make the trip off 16, and you're not going to see the same place you did as we sit here on this June the 13th. But to be able to have the architect of what's already been done and what is about to be built, this is truly a transformational time for Georgia Southern. And to see how he does so with such positivity, it's become even more of a place that people want to be at.
And it's something that he said on the first day he was in town during his press conference. He hadn't officially taken over yet, but the best days are still ahead. And he has said that through no matter what the days we've been going through, whether it be hosting a baseball regional, whether it be a tough football season. it's always been the same message of the best days are still to come. And I think that's a huge part of the outlook for this athletic program. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that outlook is now coming to fruition.
A year ago, we were able to trumpet the fact that Georgia Southern had its best finish in the Learfield Directors Cup since 2013. I would imagine it's going to be pretty close to that this year, but coming off of the heels of just hosting a regional and where our programs are headed, the kind of momentum that is building and building and building, I would think that benchmark is going to be tested continually over the next few years.
No doubt, but really appreciate what Georgia Southern and Jared Benko has done for this athletic department. We didn't get to talk about it with Jared, but had a couple of new football games getting on the schedule the last couple of weeks. You had a home-and-home with Jacksonville State.
We got 5 years.
Oh, no.
We got years to talk about, though.
I'm just saying. We're recapping everything that has happened.
Got one with just a couple days ago.
A couple of days ago with Kansas State in 2027.
The Little Apple.
Is that what that's called?
Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple.
Never knew that.
Yeah.
Huh. How about that? At Nevada in 2024. Have to catch up with our buddy Ryan Radke while we're out there.
John Ramey, the voice of Nevada, has been out there for a couple of years. Good friend of mine. Be nice to catch up with him.
And then Sanford coming to J.I. Clements Stadium to renew an old SoCon rivalry in 2027 as well. But last week we talked about and put a bow on the four sports that we cover on the Georgia Southern Sports Network with football, men's and women's basketball, and baseball. But now we kind of take a look back and look at every other sport around Georgia Southern athletics. And going through this list this afternoon as we were getting ready to do this, not that you forget, but you're like, man, they had a good year. They had a good year.
You got to remember that, wow, we did talk about this because we've talked about
the biggest thing, just remember that it was still this year.
We've talked about this before. Once you go through basketball and baseball season, you almost forget what happened in football.
No joke.
Whether it was bad or good, you almost forget about some of the things that happened. Now, the summer we'll use to recycle. We'll go back through football, and then we'll forget about basketball. We'll forget about baseball. And this thing just continues. But with volleyball, with the golfs, with women's soccer getting to the championship game, there was a lot of good that happened before we saw 3 teams in the spring get to postseason play.
You talk about women's soccer getting to the Sun Belt Finals. I was going through and I'm like, man, was that just last year?
That was this year.
Like, wow. But we'll start with Georgia Southern men's soccer. Finished up the season 4-12-1 in the first and only year in the MAC, and a lot of exciting things along the horizon for men's soccer. John Murphy, we've talked about him for ever since he got to Statesboro of how great he is as a person and a coach.
He just walked by right before we went on the air?
He did. With the Aviators, I think he had a Top Gun thing going.
Yeah. By the way, better than the original?
I would say yes, and I have a feeling I'm going to catch some flack when I get home for that. But, yeah, Rachel is a huge Top Gun fan.
Yeah.
She has a friend who is part of the Top Gun class, but being able to... And see, I hadn't seen Top Gun until probably a year and a half ago, maybe?
Yeah, that would come out before you.
Right. But Rachel's like, you have to watch this. I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. And to be honest, I was kind of half watching it, and so I didn't really soak it all in. But big fan of the second one. And we've said we got to go back and watch the first one again. So, do you think it's better than the first?
There were parts, yeah.
Okay.
Parts of the original cannot be touched, but you can't deny that what we just had a chance to see wasn't spectacular.
Oh, for sure. Anyway, men's soccer going into the Sun Belt Conference. Sun Belt Conference going to be reinstituting men's soccer as far as a sanctioned sport. And you've got Coastal Carolina, Georgia Southern, Georgia State, then the new additions to the conference as a whole of JMU, Marshall, and ODU with men's soccer. Then you bring in the additions of just soccer playing schools, men's soccer playing schools of Kentucky, South Carolina, and West Virginia. That is one heck of a men's soccer conference. And Georgia Southern and John Murphy, a huge proponent for Sunbelt soccer since the inception.
And don't forget that 2 years ago, Marshall was an unseeded team that went and won the national championship.
Correct. JMU, just a couple of years ago, they hosted an NCAA regional.
Yes.
these are really good programs that are coming in on the men's soccer side, and excited to see what the future holds for Georgia Southern men's soccer. Georgia Southern women's soccer we just talked about, but they finished up the season 11-7-4. Had a fall victory as well against Florida down in Gainesville. Had a couple of big wins. You think of that Stetson game, 2-1 victory for head coach Chris Adams at ULM, 1-0 in overtime. We've talked about that travel where the airlines did not appreciate, and so Roger Inman had to come in with a bus and drive them to Monroe. Got the victory 1-0 after a all-day bus ride to Monroe, Louisiana.
Maybe coming your way on a future edition of Eagle Tales.
Yeah.
We'll just say that.
We need to get Roger and Chris Adams to both go at it.
Well, I never drove to Monroe before, but I guess I did now.
A couple of wins in the Sun Belt Conference tournament, making it to the Sun Belt Conference Finals, and just narrowly falling to the South Alabama Jaguars, 1-0 in the Sun Belt Conference Final. Huge things under first-year head coach Chris Adams, and you really saw this program start to gel the back half of the season. Huge things coming up for them.
You would have loved to have seen Marcella Montoya finish up her career with a championship. They get within an eyelash of doing that, but Ellis Nemtsov had an outstanding year. That did not take long to get that program on track, but we know that Chris had done really well in North Georgia, picked up his 200th win extremely early here. That's a small snapshot of where everything else is headed here in Statesboro.
Georgia Southern volleyball finished the season 17-11 in a season. Defeated ULM in Foley before falling in a really good match against UT Arlington. But a couple of individual honors this year. Ashlyn Lovett, the freshman of the year in the Sun Belt Conference. Baylor Bumford, also a first-team All-Sun Belt selection. So Chad Willis and that entire staff has things on the up and up for Georgia Southern volleyball.
Both are back this year, too.
Yep. That's a huge part of it. Georgia Southern Rifle finished 13-5 overall, 7-0 in SoCon. In a top 20 ranking, they claimed their first SoCon Rifle Championship along with the small bore title back-to-back for the small bore. Aaron Ballard was the small bore athlete of the year, Ashley Judson the air rifle athlete of the year, and Sandra Warman the coach of the year. Sandra Warman announcing her retirement just after the end of the season, and cannot thank her enough for what she has done to take this program to the next level. But now, Soren Butler, the new head coach for Georgia Southern Rifle, and will be looking to take the next step of the next step.
What will he bring from West Virginia? We'll find out.
Stay tuned.
Because their mascot does hold a musket.
That's a good story that needs to be on Eagle Tales a little bit later. Frank Kearns. Man, I'm
banging away on that
rifle. I really wish I could remember who was filling in for play-by-play that night. I can't remember, but that poor guy, he was not ready for banging away on that rifle.
Was that the Hiya?
That was the Hiya.
That was the Hiya, okay.
That's a good clip. Georgia Southern men's tennis finished the season 7-11 overall and had to deal with a lot of cancellations because of weather and other factors. But a full year under his belt for Jeremy Bayon and looking on the up and up for Georgia Southern men's tennis.
Had a chance to talk with him at one of the final Eagle clubs. He was there for the Effingham County one, which was extremely well attended. I know it's one of our better events throughout the season, but I know how excited he is about keeping things moving.
Women's tennis and Sean McCaffrey finishing up 12-11. They won 6 of their last 9 matches before falling in the conference tournament to Louisiana. But we have said it many times, Sean McCaffrey is one of the best people around Georgia Southern Athletics. We saw him doing anything that he needed to with the baseball regional. Saw him doing a lot this weekend. But somebody that can lead anybody and one of the best people around this department.
Already had the success from Armstrong and had to deal with some roster attrition this year, and they still had the kind of success they did down the stretch to at least give themselves a chance to repeat what they did winning the championship the year before. Don't worry about them in the slightest.
No. Georgia Southern swimming and diving, a great program that doesn't necessarily get all the love that it deserves, but a 375 GPA this past semester, had the most postseason qualifiers in the pool this season, and the #1 Division I swim and dive program for community service in all of Division I college athletics.
And the announcement coming out just a couple of days ago that the Sun Belt has explored and it looks like they're going to be adding swimming and diving as a sponsored sport as early as 23. Beach volleyball is going to be involved there as well. That's a big thing for Coach Caldwell and crew.
Georgia Southern women's golf, after a tough March, finished the season as hot as anybody, won the Mimosa Hills Intercollegiate up in North Carolina, then went to the Sunbelt Conference Tournament and won, then headed to the first regional in program history, finished 7th down in Tallahassee. But we've said the names Saracen Radisson and Abby Newton a lot, and things are definitely good things along the horizon for Mimi Burke and company.
You saw Saracen be real steady throughout the entire season. Abby was a late rush at the end, kind of like a Mason Williams was for men's golf, where Ben Carr was the nice steady influence throughout the year. On the links, Georgia Southern might have the most complete program, or however you want to smush that together. But golf-wise, I wouldn't think that very many, at least at this level, certainly not in the Sun Belt, can match them on the men's and women's side.
And you look at what men's golf does, and I think a lot of it just becomes you expect it, but what Georgia Southern men's golf was able to do, a top 50 finish in the polls, that got them an at-large bid into the NCAA regionals. They go to Yale. They qualify for the NCAA finals. They go out to Scottsdale and hold their own out there. But it seems like you're kind of surprised when it doesn't happen for Georgia Southern men's golf more than you're surprised when it happens.
That's a part of our 3 spring teams getting to the postseason that hasn't really been publicized. 2 got in via at-large.
Yeah.
And for a group of 5 or a mid-major, however you want to term it, for that to be a thing, that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. Georgia Southern softball finished up the season 13-34, had big wins against Louisiana at home, took 2 out of 3 against Georgia State at home as they wrapped up the regular season. Had to deal with a lot of adversity, did this team going throughout the season, but definitely a program on the rise as Sharon Perkins with a year under her belt.
I would be curious to see what the pitching staff looks like next year, because I know that's going to be the big emphasis this offseason. It's probably going to look a lot different, but I think it's clear that they had enough offense to at least give themselves a chance. But pitching-wise, they get that up to snuff. That should be a program that should make some noise with a league that, just has to welcome in James Madison next year, which participated in a national championship just the year before.
I do this a couple of times throughout the year where I kind of surprise you with things that I ask you. Well, I probably do it more than I realize, actually.
You'd be surprised.
But we talked about how we were going to do the recap of the sports that we didn't touch on last week. Again, last week we had the ones that the Georgia Southern Sports Network directly covers with football, men's and women's basketball, and baseball. This week we had every other sport. But looking at the kind of 100,000-foot view, I'll give you top 3. What are your top 3 memories from this past year? Or top 3 things that you look back and, I know. I'm going to try to fill some time.
What are you doing to me? You realize how many things happened this year?
Right. But your top 3 should just jump out. What jumps out at you from, and it doesn't have to be 3. I'm not limiting you to 3. I'm just saying at least 3.
All sports the entire year.
Yes.
Okay, 1 is hosting a regional, without a doubt.
Yep. Okay.
That's probably 1. 2 is being able to say that we have got so many facilities projects that are happening at the same time, when you can say it's roughly $80 million worth of breaking ground on an IPF and a convocation center at the same time. That's historic. That's never been done here. Those numbers have never been really spoken of here. That shows you where we are headed. Is there one that I'm missing that I should be getting? Because you made it sound like this should be pretty easy.
I'm just opening for. I can't control what you enjoyed this year, nor would I want to.
Man,
you want me to say mine and then you finish yours?
Yeah, I'll start. The 2 out of 3 ain't bad. You go and do yours. You do yours.
All right.
You killed me with that one. I got to know that stuff.
I got to keep you on your toes.
That is true.
If you just have everything planned out in life, it's not nearly as fun. Just ask different people. But yeah, I'm with you. The number 1 was hosting the regional and being able to watch really good baseball. It turned out to be a lot better baseball than even you thought when you had the teams announced. You knew that Texas Tech and Notre Dame, UNCG were all going to be really good games. Turned out Notre Dame goes up to Knoxville and knocks off Tennessee, which that's for another podcast. But Notre Dame is going to Omaha, so truly Omaha had to go through Statesboro. That is unreal. And watching the first 2 games of that Tennessee or that Knoxville Super Regional and hearing so many times of Notre Dame did this in the Statesboro Regional. This happened in the Statesboro Regional. This guy pitched in the Statesboro Regional. I'm like,
That's us.
I was like, we were there. We were over there. That's awesome. Number 2 is one that we've talked about, and you've heard me talk about plenty in our travels throughout the back half of the year. But the first game for Georgia Southern women's basketball at Auburn, knocking off the Auburn Tigers, that was some of the most fun I think I've had in a long time. And we've talked about it a lot over the last couple of years. Georgia Southern women's basketball has been close to knocking off a number of different teams. Georgia a couple times. You think of Ole Miss taking them to overtime in Oxford on a kids' day, which there was a bunch of people there. Then it happened to be a tornado warning, but that's for another day. But to finally get over that hump of a really big victory for this program, and then it set the tone for the rest of the season, a historic year as far as wins go for Georgia Southern, the most wins since the early 2000s for women's basketball. Really fun year that started off up on the Plains with a victory over Auburn. And then number 3, I said this was going to be easy. You'd think I would have the top 3 when I was the one that asked it.
And we're going to be done with this, and we're going to think, oh, how do we forget that?
Yeah, I know. You and I are going to text each other later on tonight. Man, I should have said this.
All right, my third one is going to surprise you, but it's...
Okay.
And I mentioned this right when it happened, but the entire BYU football weekend.
Yeah.
The 1906 event, the unveiling of the Giving Societies on the wall near the Eagle Club, right outside of Paulson Stadium, welcoming BYU for the first time ever, a top 25 team, the highest ranked team to ever visit, seeing the mid-deck filled for the first time in a while. We expanded, but things haven't worked. I mean, you can factor in the pandemic how you want to, but to see that mid-deck filled, to be able to announce more than 20,000 people at Paulson, Georgia Southern was right with BYU up until late in the second quarter. And I'll go on record that Tyler Algier, the running back for BYU, was one of the best to ever play in this stadium. That run he had in the fourth quarter, the fourth quarter run he had on second and Provo or whatever it was, and him to just run straight ahead, and he ends up getting drafted. So even though the game didn't end the way that Georgia Southern wanted, I remember saying that in the talk that we're going to look back on that weekend where things started to change. Because you saw what people had done for the program. You also got the announcement of the Tippins family indoor practice facility, his generous contributions, one of many that he has done, this, of course, being the biggest in the history of the athletic department, but how big that weekend is going to turn out being once we get months and years down the line.
Mine is kind of along the same route that you took for your third, but I will say my number 3 for the year was the couple of days of introducing Clay Helton as the new football coach, because it came a lot earlier than many people thought it would. I mean, you're thinking you've got, 4 more weeks of the regular season. You'd probably take a couple more weeks at least, but if you do, I don't know that you get Clay Helton with everything that kind of shook out in the college football world the next couple of weeks. And so, but to see from the time that it was announced to the time that he landed at the Statesboro Airport, through the press conference, through the Hail Southern Live that night, there was so much excitement around that program that needed to be around that program at the time, and to see everybody come together around that event, that was a really cool day. It was a long day, but that was a really cool day.
Did you read the story I think it was in The Athletic, about how that hiring triggered something like 250 other coaching jobs across multiple levels?
Yes.
To know that Georgia Southern was the first that had that kind of impact.
Yeah, somebody put out a grid that went along with the story of everybody that was affected in some way, shape, or form, and it had their old job, their new job. I mean, it trickled down to like Elisa Lamar going over to Georgia Southern football for a time. They knocked down everybody. But no, this has been a crazy year for Georgia Southern athletics, but this is one that I think you're going to look back on, and I don't know if they're still going to be doing podcasts in 50 years or what they're going to be doing, if they just teleport into your home, whatever. I don't know.
They'll just implant it into your mind.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this is one in years to come folks are going to look back on the 21-22 athletic year and be like, that was a special year for Georgia Southern athletics, and it got a lot of things rolling in the right direction.
And to be able to say that something like this year happened the year after a worldwide pandemic was finally controlled. Look, we're still dealing with it in some ways. We had some basketball cancellations on both sides. Thankfully got through an entire baseball season, and there will still be some testing. There will still be protocols in place for the unvaccinated individuals. But to be able to say that just a year ago, we were wondering what it was going to be like, because a year ago, we were still getting tested 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Baseball had just become 100%. The tournament, the baseball tournament, we weren't even sure where would we be able to go at Montgomery, because it was the first time in Montgomery because we didn't get it in 20.
And then we explored the whole place.
Yeah. And we got the nice test run. That was the test run last year. Getting a chance to do it full bore this year. I am extremely excited, I'm enthusiastic, and I am maybe more hopeful than ever about not just where Georgia Southern is headed, but I think the Sun Belt as well. There's so much strife about NIL, the transfer portal, about so many people are talking about what's wrong with college athletics. What's wrong with college athletics? Why can't it be better? Maybe you could turn the light on the Sun Belt and see things that are kind of being done really well.
No, and you mentioned it with Jared. You're, 2 weeks and some change away from 4 new additions to the Sun Belt Conference. Yeah. Southern Miss, who just hosted a super regional.
Yeah.
ODU, a program that is at the top of a lot of different sports. James Madison, one of the top 1AA teams, or FCS teams, that is moving up. And we've seen what happens when a FCS team moves up to the FBS, or what can happen into the Sun Belt Conference. You look at the last 3, and they've done pretty well in Coastal, Georgia Southern, Appalachian State. And then you've got Marshall, who has some of the most historic athletic department in college athletics history.
Look, I cannot wait till we get a chance to go to Huntington for the first time, especially for football, but especially to go to Huntington and see the memorial and just be able to revisit a place that Eagle Nation used to go to. That is going to become an outstanding football rivalry.
For sure.
Look, the last time that we played, Randy Moss came down here, scored 2 touchdowns, and things kind of went a certain way because they were number 1 in the country. But I'm just telling you, the way that they are in Huntington and the way people are in Statesboro, getting to remarry the two, that is going to become a circled game on the schedule because they're in the East. That is going to be a circled game every year. That is an awesome thing to be able to have them back.
And we were talking about it with different folks around the Sun Belt. This isn't a football move. Does it get you to 14 football schools and all of your football playing schools are not just football members? Absolutely. But this affects pretty much every sport that Georgia Southern and the Sun Belt Conference sponsor in some way, shape, or form.
And the 2 sports that we talked about a little earlier that are going to be added for the start of the 23 season, there's potential that more could be coming down the line. But we know that Conference Media Day is about 6 weeks away, and it's 2 days this year. 7 teams in the East are going to go day 1. 7 teams in the West are going to go in day 2. I'm curious to see what the conversation is like because a year ago, the concept of NIL had just exploded onto everybody. Yeah. What we're going to do? What's NIL? What does it mean? What does it stand for? It's going to be a little bit of that, but I'm curious to see what the overarching conversation is relative to this new look Sun Belt.
It's going to be interesting to see what the next 6 months to a year look like, not only for Georgia Southern, but for the Sun Belt as well. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this is the most hopeful and the most excitement that has been around Georgia Southern athletics as a whole in a pretty long time.
We just need to have the understanding that things are going in the right direction, and that doesn't mean that football is going to go 12-0 this year. It doesn't mean that they're going to play for conference championship. It doesn't mean that they're going to make a New Year's Six or whatever you want to call it. But you do want to see progress. Yeah. It begins with football. Football is the brightest light for a very successful athletic department becoming even more successful. But with what's been done, football, because it's the first sport, the first big sport, has a chance to set the tone. And the toughness, discipline, united, we've heard from Coach Helton and staff. I can't wait to see what that looks like. It's going to begin September the 3rd against Morgan State at Alan E. Paulson Stadium. Very next week, going out to Big Ten country. I still feel that's weird. But going to see the Nebraska Cornhuskers for the first time ever, going to UAB the next week at Ball State at home. Then you get your 8 conference games, got to go to Norfolk to play Old Dominion. James Madison comes to you. Marshall comes to you. You finish up with Appalachian State, end of the season, which a lot of people felt it always should have been at the end of the season. But we'll spend the next couple of weeks and months getting you ready for that and keeping you updated on what's going on here.
Again, let us know what you would like to hear from. Again, throughout the summer is the time where we can be a little bit more creative and try a couple different things throughout the summer. But let us know what you are wanting to see, wanting to hear, who you're wanting to hear from. Just let us know what you are wanting, and we will somehow, some way get it to you here on Inside Eagle Nation. But until next week, for the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed, this is Colin Lacy saying so long, everybody.
You've been listening to Inside Eagle Nation, powered by Learfield, the official podcast of Georgia Southern Athletics.